Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project, where we inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. In today's episode, we are joined by Don Campbell, author of the book Creativity, It's Not What You Think. Don and I cover a wide range of topics, including deep listening, emotional intelligence, and blocking points that might be preventing you from unlocking your own creativity and the creativity within your teams. Please sit back, listen and absorb, and really think about how you might apply some of this in your leadership style. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project. We've got something really special for you today as we're joined by Don Campbell, an artist, a creator, and author of a book called Creativity, It's Not What You Think. Here at the Leadership Project, we like to challenge your thinking and for you to challenge the status quo of what it means to be a leader in the world. And we like to hear from diverse minds and their thoughts about different topics that can help enrich you to be a leader. And that's why I'm so greatly honored to be joined by Don today for us to think about what does that mean? What is creativity? And why might that be important to a leader in your career and how you develop and foster creativity in your own teams? So some of you may find this a little bit left field. We're talking to an artist. We are talking to an artist that's been in business as well, and we'll cover that during the interview. But we're really going left field here to learn from the field of art and to bring that in to think about what that might mean in terms of creativity in a business setting and in a leadership setting. So without further ado, let's introduce Don and we'll get straight into the interview. Don, thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited about the interview today. I've read your book. It was absolutely thought-provoking for me, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with our audience today. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
To get us started, I've given a little bit of a teaser to the audience about what you do, and you've got a background in business or in graphic design, but then also as a sculptor and an artist. But maybe put a little bit more detail in that so the audience know a little bit more about who Don Campbell is.
I was born in Toronto, and I knew that I was artistic right from the very early age. I was encouraged by my parents, although they didn't know anything about artists or how to nurture me to become an artist in any way at all. It wasn't until high school that I really dove into it a little deeper, and I had a choice to go to fine art or graphic design, which back then was called commercial art. And I did, and I loved it. I chose commercial art because I felt it would give me a career, and I liked it. But I left fine art behind me. I didn't pursue that at all. And I left school fairly early to launch my career. I was a little bit of an entrepreneur in spirit, even early on. I worked for companies and I was really jumping around from job to job. I was offered jobs all over Toronto, very fast pace. It was very exciting, and ultimately offered a job in the United States, down in New Jersey. Now, I had no desire to move to the United States at the time. I had my life mapped out for me in Canada. Even at a young age, I had bought property. I loved Northern Ontario. I just loved it up there. So New Jersey wasn't appealing to me, but I came down and they had me come down over a period of time, and I worked for a company down here and went back and forth, and ultimately they offered me a full-time job. It was a very tough decision for me to make as a 25 or 26-year-old. It was very difficult to make, but ultimately, I made it thinking I was going to only stay a year or so, make some money, go back and finish my life up in Canada. But, I got so seduced by New York, which I was only a few minutes from. And I just loved the city. It had a vibrancy that was just unbelievable to me, even though Toronto's a fabulous city. And my job took me all over the United States. I was traveling. It was very exciting for me. My friends would say, how could you move to the United States? How could you do that? And I used to tell them, oh, it's just like swimming in a bigger pond. It's just so big down here and so exciting. And even still, I thought I would go back. But, that was 40 years ago. And I stayed here. My family's still all in Canada. Those are still with me. And I've changed a lot. And I left that business that brought me to New Jersey within about a year or so. And then I started my own business with another Canadian. We worked for that company freelancing. And we did very well right out of the box. It was very successful. And I stayed in that business over the years. But that was my entrepreneurial spirit, my business part of me that wanted to be my own boss, wanted to pursue my own career. And I've been in that business and I'm still in that business to this very day, although it has changed many times over those years and even changed businesses. But I've been a graphic designer, advertising guy, marketing guy all those years.
That's great, Don. I really enjoyed that story. Thinking about the Big Apple for a moment, something that I was thinking about while I was listening to you talk. And we hear people talk about this all the time, whether it be movie makers like Woody Allen, just completely inspired by that city, musicians, whether it be Billy Joel, New York State of Mind, or even through to Alicia Keys. One of her famous lines is, New York, the concrete jungle where dreams are made of. And it sounds like that exactly is what gravitated you there and inspired you to become the artist that you are today. Is that a fair thing to say?
It is. New York has a vibrancy and an energy unlike I've felt anywhere else. And I've been to a lot of cities. But New York has a creative pulse to it, an aliveness, even with all its maybe negative aspects. And maybe we'll talk about this later, but it has a communal, collective energy that, because of where it is and what it is, it's a center for ideas and life. It's just magnificent.
I love listening to this. And it even makes me think like of Bohemian Paris from the 1800s, or like that communal feeling,
I'm sure it was.
Inspiration.
Yes.
I want to head towards your book now, and I want to start with something very in particular there. And just for the audience at home, please do stay on for the entire podcast. Don and I have got something special to share with you at the end, where we are looking to give some free copies of Don's book away to 3 lucky listeners. So please stay on for that. We'll give details of that at the end. I want to go through some of the things that I took from your book and hear in your own words what it also meant from you. And just starting out from the very beginning, you talk about one word that changed your life. What was that word, Don?
I told you a little bit about my experience in high school where I took an art course, and I did 2 sculptures in high school. One was a plaster modern freeform tree, and I did another one which was also modern in plexiglass and metal. And I just loved working as a sculptor. I just loved it. I'd never done it before in my life, and that was part of the course. But I told myself, wow, this is really nice, but I'm going to have to wait and do this some other day because I'm consumed with my work and I want to be a successful designer. So I put that on the shelf and I went on with my life. As I said, it was fast-paced, but there was something in me that always felt there was something missing in my life. And I've been kind of a guy who's interested in self-help, self-improvement all my life. And I had a tendency for depression too. And even in my work, I would tend to get in those states of depression and thinking there was something else. And at one point in my life, and I'd spent probably a decade or a decade and a half or more in my business. And I was still searching, and I saw this workshop, and it was called Do What You Love. One of these workshops, Do What You Love, Find What You Love in Life. And I said, wow, I'm going to go to that to see, do what it is that somehow I'm missing. And I went to that workshop. It was a weekend workshop here in New Jersey. And I really wasn't getting it. It was almost over. It was the last day, and there was only an hour or so left. And I approached the workshop leader, and I said, I just not finding anything. I'm not getting anything. Nothing's working for me. And I guess he could see my frustration and my, how stuck I was. And he looked at me and he said, Don, if you do one thing and you learn one thing this weekend, I want you to add one word to your vocabulary. And I was kind of stunned by that. I said, really? One word? And he said, yes. I want you to say the word and, A-N-D. You can be a graphic designer and a sculptor. Now, that may sound very simple to some of your viewers, but that was such a profound experience for me that it changed my life. That moment changed my life because from that moment, my whole viewpoint changed. I was in a prison, a self-imposed prison in my thoughts. I believed that I could only do one thing. As simple as that sounds, I could only do one thing at a time. I couldn't allow myself because I had the pressure of my business. I needed to earn a living. I was very success-oriented. I was pushing myself. And when he said that, it was like he pulled a shade away. I could see. And within a week, I had joined a sculpture class, and I'd been sculpting ever since, and that was over 30 years ago. It seems simple, but it taught me a lesson, an unbelievable lesson, that my thoughts are so powerful, they can run my life without me even knowing it. On a subliminal, subconscious level, they can be running my life without me even knowing it.
There are so many things to unpack there, Don. I almost don't know where to start, but I'm going to share with you what I took away from everything that you just said. And then I'd love your reflection on my reflection, if you like. So the first part was do what you love. And I'm sure everyone in our audience has heard this statement before. I'm going to have to look up who was the originator of this one because I use it all the time and I never remember it.
Yeah.
But do what you love and you never have to work a day in your life. And finding your passion is so important. That was the first thing I took. The second one was about not pigeonholing yourself. Don't be so strict about your identity and who you are in the world. You can be more than one thing. The third one is that word and I'm a big fan of this word as well, in a slightly different way, but I think it's the same thing. I talk a lot with my team about the concept of conversational intelligence and about convincing people to stop using the words yes, but, and start using the words yes, and. Because but is a negation. You're agreeing with the person that's just said by saying yes, and then you're immediately negating and it's a negative word that draws you downwards, not upwards. Whereas and is an additive word. It's something that enables you to grow from the position that you're at. It sends you in a virtuous cycle rather than a downward spiral. So the word and, I think, is really powerful. And for you, you're talking about being, I can be a graphic designer and a sculptor. And in a business sense, a leader can be someone and they can be someone else. And collectively as a team, the power of the word "and" is an additive word. And then the final one, because you gave so many gems there, was about the power of thought. And the power of thought is so incredible. If you go around the world with negative thoughts, you'll have negative experiences. Any meeting that you go into thinking, oh, this meeting is not going to go well, guess what? There's a good chance it's not going to go well. If you go into a meeting going, this meeting is going to be a great meeting and we're going to get a great outcome, there's a better than average chance that you will achieve what you set out to achieve. And I think it's Henry Ford that says something along the lines of, whether you think you can or can't, you're probably right. So what are your thoughts on my reflections from you? I'm trying to listen and absorb you, and then put it into my business environment and also my team. Any reflections on what I shared there?
Well, particularly like the way you talked about "and" as expansive, because that's what it did. It freed me. It expanded my world so quickly and so fast. And it's a kind of a little micro example of what I talk about in my book, and that's raising one's consciousness, raising one's awareness of what is really going on, what is really possible, what can I do if I really truly listen and I open myself up to what is available, what is really there, rather than being closed in a closed kind of a environment where particularly it's in my mind, So I really appreciate your thoughts on that word "and" how you viewed it as it's expansive. Really very interesting. Your thoughts on our mind, the way we think. This is really, again, what my book is about. Obviously, the subtext is it's not what you think, and that has a dual meaning. My book, Creativity, it's not what you think. It's not what you think it is, and it's not what you think in your mind anyway. So creativity is about getting your mind out of the way, like a lot of the great masters have done that I talk about. And they don't really, or they don't give us information, they don't tell us, but they're the experiential proof of this system of creating space for creativity to come. And I can give you example upon example of this. So thinking is important, and I've done it. I've spent hours and hours and years on developing my talent, moving the clay, learning anatomy, doing my homework. I'm like a musician who learns to play the piano to the point where they don't have to think about playing the piano. They can be free like an improvisational jazz pianist that can just play the piano. They said, I don't have to think about my hands. They know what to do. My body knows what to do. So what does it listen to? It listens to the input, the feeling from the heart, from just letting it flow through them.
So musicians often talk about their instrument becomes an extension of their own body. It's just part of their being. It
Exactly.
Sounds like you're saying that for sculptors as well.
It is. It's exactly what I do. And it's my favorite type of sculpting. I do commission work where it's a blend. And if we have time later, I'll give you some examples of how I did that and how I worked through the challenges of that.
You mentioned about the title of the book. Let's circle back to that. Creativity. It's not what you think. That's provocative in its own way. And I'm sure everyone out there is sitting there thinking right now, well, okay, so what is it? Do you have a definition of creativity?
Yeah, I do, but it's not my own. I have a quote that is my favorite quote. And it is from Rollo May, the 20th century psychologist, who wrote a number of books. Courage to Create is one of his books, and where this came from. And his quote is, "Creativity is the process of bringing something new into being. It brings to our awareness what was previously hidden and points to new life. The experience is one of heightened consciousness, ecstasy." To me, that is like beautiful music. It touches everything. It is just a masterpiece of a quote of what I believe creativity is.
Thank you for sharing that. Now I want to bounce from that to think about leadership. Obviously, our podcast is the Leadership Project, and all of our audience are people that are looking to improve and grow and sharpen the saw in terms of their leadership. What do you think creativity means to a leader?
So exactly in this quote is, whether you're a leader, leading anything, whether you're an academic, a researcher, teacher, change maker, community activist, thought leaders, whatever it is you're leading, business, you're trying to get out of unproductive patterns, maybe. You're trying to come up with new innovation, new ideas, trying to solve problems. And you're trying to make a group work together as a unit to form something larger as a whole than the individual parts, to bring those all together. And that's part of the process that's in my book that I talk about, teaches us how to do. It was actually developed by someone that is out of the leadership mode in the academic world. And it seemed like an unlikely source for me to get something as an artist, but it is so beautiful, this process that I use, that I couldn't resist it. I had to bring it into my own self and my own creativity, creating my own sculptures. Now, I use in my books my sculptures as a metaphor or a model for whatever you want to do and whatever you're involved in your life. And this could be leadership. It could be solving problem. It could be, if you're a postman, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's adaptable to life. It's actually a little bit like your previous podcast with Matt Lohmeyer and negotiations. He said negotiations are one thing and they're used and people think that, but it's really life. It's really about life experience. And I love the way he brought that into life. And that's what I'm doing with mine, because this wisdom that he had and this process is for life. It's not just say, okay, I'm going to use this to negotiate a problem with this group and this group. It's about, how do I negotiate through my life? So how do I live a more creative life? Doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm in business, how do I be more creative? Not just in problem solving, but in dealing with my fellow employees, my boss, my clients, everybody.
Matt is very famous for saying that negotiation is not a business skill, it's a life skill. And he's going to be so pleased that you picked that up in his podcast and now you're applying it in your own world of creativity. Creativity is not a business skill, it's a life skill. I love this, Don. Really great share there. One of the things you said along the way, you mentioned about something becoming greater than, you didn't use these words, but I'm going to use my own words to you now. It's very similar to what you said. I talked to my team about the need to be greater than the sum of our parts. So collectively as a team, we are far more powerful than just the sum of all of our individual abilities, if we get it right. And creativity is part of that. So in a team leadership environment, do you have any tips for our audience about how you can foster creativity in that team?
I think that one of the things that we will be talking about, hopefully a little later, is that opening ourselves up to other. And one of the key components of my life and my work is that being able to stand in another person's shoes, to really listen to them, to understand them, to really honor them in a way that maybe gives them a sense of validity, whatever it is. It doesn't really, it just that I respect them. I want to hear them. What they want is important. I see them as equal. And it's not about me. It's about what can we do? What can you, who are you? You know, and it's the relationship and that listening and being open enough. And also what is very key is, can I feel you? Can I really feel you? Can I give you the space to be yourself? Can I make you feel secure to really be yourself and tell me what really you want to tell me, what really you want to tell the world?
So many powerful words there again, Don. I'm just loving this interview. We can forget the rest of the day. We can just talk all day, I think, Don. So some of the key words you're saying there about respect, about honoring the other person. You didn't use the word empathy, but everything you spoke about was about empathy.
Absolutely.
Listening, really listening, and we'll get back to that shortly. And you spoke about emotion, about how the other person feels, giving them a psychologically safe environment for them to be themselves. And when someone can be themselves, they can then be at their most creative and their most effective in the role that they play in your team. Really great stuff, Don. Let's take that now into application. In your book, you speak a lot about Theory U. What can you share with our audience about what that means?
So Theory U is a change management method to help leaders in business, civil organizations, educational institutions break through unproductive patterns to foster innovation and creativity. Now, that's what it's for. It was developed by Otto Scharmer, a senior lecturer at MIT in Boston. He's a PhD in economics. Like I said, he's not really what I would have looked for to get inspired as a creative artist, because he comes from the academic world. He's maybe a little bit more left-brain thinker. But what he has created here, and the reason it's called Theory U, is that it's a process that goes down a U and up the other side. And the bottom of the U, I'll explain. But this system takes in much of what I've been saying. It is based on wholeness, being open, and including so much that nothing is left out, whether it's the things that we don't want to look at that are hidden, like Rollo May said, what was previously hidden that get revealed. He's willing to look at those things and incorporate them into the process. And there's an aspect of it that I use, although it's not the whole aspect, and it's called deep listening. And this process is what I use in my sculpting, and I use in my book, and I talk about this deep listening. It opens you up. It gets you in a space to do something creative, to do something innovative. It's a process of taking you through that level. And that's what I do. I can take you through that system if you like. I don't know whether you need to know more about Theory U or not, but that's a little bit about it.
So I think for Theory U, what we'll do is we'll share some things in the show notes. We're also going to share a link for people to go and find your book, Don, so they can go into Theory U in more depth. And I encourage all the audience to do that. It's really quite impactful when you look at this Theory U graphic. It really speaks volumes when you look at it. Let's go a bit, pardon the pun, let's go a bit deeper into deep listening. What does deep listening really mean, and how might someone start improving their ability to have a deep listening in the way that they do their work?
There's 4 levels of deep listening, according to Theory U. The first level is a level, it's called listening to what you already know, listening to habits, listening to our old judgments, listening to maybe we developed our system, and this goes back to what I was talking about before, in my own a mental construct that I have from family, from our tribe, from our culture that we live. Maybe it's religion, maybe it's school, whatever it is. But we've got a mindset that we operate from, just like I did before somebody introduced a word to me. This is you're constantly rehashing what you already know. You only let in what confirms what you already know. It's a little bit like, repeating the past. Creativity does not live here. Creativity does not live there, but you have to recognize, I had to recognize that I was in listening to my old habits. I was in a closed loop, and somebody shocked me out of that. So that's first, and we recognize that we were in that. The next level is opening mind. You're opening your mind. You start opening up to new information, factual information, noticing the differences between what you know and what somebody else says. And you look for factual information, you accept it, you learn, you read books, you go to workshops, you go on podcasts like this. You disconfirm some of the information you had. So already we're seeing what we're doing is we're expanding our knowledge base. We're expanding, we're opening up, we're letting more in, which is all very helpful. Everybody is in and out of these two levels. Nobody's in one and stays in one. We're in them. I was in all of them. I've been in them, and I'm going to be in them for a long time. So the next one is my favorite, really. It's opening your heart. Opening your heart. That's what I mentioned briefly before about empathy. Being able to feel my own emotions without a knee-jerk reaction, be able to host them in my body, be able to feel another person's emotion and be able to deal with it, to be able to let that emotion come to me without being reactive, and also have a sensitivity to emotion, because emotions speak to us. It's a language. It's information. And most of us are shut down. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to feel depressed. We don't want to feel this. But it's always telling us something. It's always telling us something. And in the book, I make this case for Bernini, the great 16th and 17th century sculptor, and how he elevated sculpting to a new level where there were masters before him, but he took it and he did it through opening his heart and through emotions primarily. But this is seeing through the other person's eyes, which is critical in the listening that we talked about briefly before. Now, level 4, listening 4, is generative from the future. We want something new to happen. We want a new future. And this is open will. This is listening for is open will. The will to want something, to let something happen. The will to let go of something. The will to open myself up so that a new future can come through me. And this is what I do, and I show people how to do this through my sculpting. But once again, it can be anything. And this is the very bottom of the U that Otto calls presencing. And presencing is a word that he coined. It includes sensing and presence. Presence is a common word used today for mindfulness, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi. There's many modalities out there that want you to be in the present moment. And they talk about the power of being in the present moment. And in his sports particularly, it's very popular about being in the present moment and getting in the flow of things. And this is the space that we create at the bottom of the U. And once we're in that space, once we've opened our mind, opened our hearts, and we're open for change, then we start doing things. Then I use my example of my sculpt, then I start moving the clay. I start making something, prototyping, trying this, and it could be anything. It could be a business, solving a problem. We're prototyping, we're changing things. We've got a group going on with this too, which is many cases with Otto's work. There's U Labs all over the world, and they get together in groups and they go through this process and they work through this system, and they get to this place. Going up the U is where the work comes in, but it comes from this space of presence. Everybody's present, and we know that there's a new future emerging if we can keep working from that presence and not go into level 1, open our minds, open our hearts, and see what the present moment brings. And it's a beautiful experience. It creates unbelievable things in my life. So
I want to unpack a lot of that in more detail, Don, and we might go a topic at a time. And I would like your views on some of the things I'm about to say. And I've got a pretty challenging question, I think, towards the end of it. We'll see how we go. Let's start with level 1. Let's start with habits. Habits are well documented now through books like Atomic Habits, etc., etc. Positive habits can be very powerful. They can help you, and habit forming can be a good thing. But what I'm hearing from you is it can also be quite a limiting thing. If you're a creature of habit that doesn't open yourself up to new experiences, then that is going to limit your creativity.
Absolutely. And I speak for myself, and I've had plenty of habits that were patterns really of unproductive outcomes constantly, or limiting outcomes. They limited me until I could recognize it and say, okay, this isn't working. I need to work through this, or I need to drop this habit. And there's all kinds of ways of doing that. But yeah, there are good habits, and I have some good habits, and I have some habits or patterns, I like to say, that are unproductive.
And I think one of the keys here will be almost recognizing in yourself, and we'll talk more about self-awareness in a moment, but recognizing in yourself which of those habits that you do have are completely fine. They're sustainable habits that help you live your life, and which ones are non-productive, where if you let those habits go, you could open your mind, open your heart, open your will to start thinking about new and different ways. One of the sayings that I also share with my team quite often is that different is not necessarily wrong. And I encourage this of all of my leaders. Let's say that if their staff members come up with a completely different way of doing something, that doesn't mean it's wrong. If the leader had one idea about how to do it and someone comes up with a different idea, as long as it still achieves the outcome, does it really matter? And in fact, could it be exploring new possibilities that we haven't considered? What are your thoughts on that statement? Different is not necessarily wrong.
I completely embrace that, and I encourage that, because there isn't any wrong answer or wrong idea that can come up. Everything leads to something else. So everything is, and I can give you an example. Once again, I go back to art, and I've been the instructor in art classes, and some people are maybe sculpting a face, and they got it all wrong. And, the mouth is in the wrong place. Everything's wrong. But I talk to them about it, and I say, how do you feel about this? And I question them. I say, do you want to make that face look more like this person, or would you rather go on the way you're going on and you create your own, what you see and what you feel about that person? And I encourage them to keep building on that. Unless they say, no, I really want it to look like that person, then I tell them how to make it look like that person. But I really like it when they say, no, I want to keep going. I like what I'm doing. And it doesn't look anything like them. But it's a great creation from inside of them.
Can you imagine that we would definitely not have had Picasso if his art teacher said, no, that's not how you do it?
Exactly, right. Especially him.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, very good. Now I want to go into a topic that's very near and dear to my heart and of the Leadership Project, and that's about emotional intelligence. You did speak a lot about open mind and open heart. You spoke a lot about self-awareness, and you delved right into a topic which is really important. Everyone thinks about emotional intelligence as being the ability to read someone else's emotions and to process that. And that is a big part of emotional intelligence. But a potentially even more powerful part of emotional intelligence is being self-aware of your own emotions, your own emotional triggers, and how to control your response to those emotional triggers in a positive way. Now, what do I mean by control? That does not mean that you're not allowed to be emotional. It means understanding what your emotional triggers are and having an appropriate response. It could be a response, or it may be a zero response, but it's about having an appropriate response to those emotional triggers in a way that is productive for yourself and productive for the people that are working around you. What are your thoughts on that, Don?
Well, that's you say it's one of your favorites, and I love emotions, and I really wrap the emotions around the heart and the open heart, and I feel they're very close, or if not completely the same. I believe also that the ability to be able to feel someone's emotions, even if they're maybe directed at me and maybe aggressive to me, I believe that they're something that I need to get past the difficulty I'm having emotionally, feeling that emotion come towards me. Because behind that emotion is something else, something intelligent. There's a message, there's a thought behind it that I want to know about if I'm in communication with this person. So if I just respond in the way that most people respond, that's to hit back or to fight back, then you've lost the moment, you've lost the communication. Whereas I like to be able to pride myself with being able to host, as Thomas Hubel would say, host the feeling inside my body, to feel it, to be able to not reject it, to be able to be in my body, to digest it, and still be able to respond to that person in a compassionate, empathetic way. That is where true connection, understanding, compassion will be, and it will be better for both of us in that relationship.
Very insightful, Don. Thank you for sharing that. And you used the word connection there, which is really important and really relevant to everything that we're saying there. I want to share something now for business leaders that are listening to the podcast. Or you could be a salesperson, a business leader, someone that is looking to make the most of this. And this is getting into brain psychology at this point. And Don, I'd like to hear your thoughts at the end of what I'm about to say. One thing that we all need to realize at some point is where in your brain do people make decisions? Whether that be buying decisions, behavioral decisions, life choice decisions, whether they're going to stay with your company or not, whether they're going to make a purchase from your company or not. All of those decisions are made in the limbic brain. And the limbic brain is the same part of the brain that is responsible for processing emotions. The frontal cortex is where people rationalize. That's where logic comes in and where they might rationalize something that's in front of them, and they'll assess it and they'll assess one product over another or one company over another. And there is an importance to the frontal cortex, of course. But decision-making is made in the limbic brain. And the limbic brain is the one that's responsible for processing emotion, not rational decisions. How do you think that plays into open mind and open heart when it gets to someone's decision-making about their life or about buying decisions or business?
Well, I'm not a brain expert, but I know that the brain is a processing mechanism, and it processes, as you said, the emotions. So what I'm done in my life is I've tried to manage that processing of the emotions that I believe come from the heart, come from the body, to be able to manage them and not react. Let my brain react, to send a message back down to an emotional reaction. So I like to feel my emotions. I like to feel them. I believe they speak to me. I can give you another example of my artwork where if I'm sculpting somebody, this is where I do an improvisational sculpting. And my sculpting is coming out, and I feel that what I'm sculpting, this man, and I have this guy in my book, is very dark. He's dark character. He might be evil even, and yet I'm feeling that in my body. And I want him to come to me. I want to create him. This is what I was talking. I want the future to come to me. So I have to be able to keep feeling this darkness. I have to feel it. It's going up to my brain. That's what you're saying, and I'm analyzing it. But the thing is that if I wasn't able to feel in my body this darkness of this guy, I wouldn't have been able to sculpt him and have his face express that darkness, because I could feel it in my own face when I sculpt him. So I needed to feel it and be okay with those feelings, that they weren't mine. I was just feeling them, and I was using them. They were working my hands. So that's the way I am in conversation with somebody too. If I'm feeling something from them, if I'm feeling it, yes, I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to, I have a choice. I have a choice. Can I host this? Can I feel it? And let's get to the root of this. Let's get past this. Am I strong enough to be able to hold this for this person? And then find out what's behind that. I don't know whether that answers your question or not, but
that was very powerful, Don. And what I take from that, people, I'm sure, are familiar with this term. They're familiar with the term method acting. They're aware that actors do this. They embody the person that they're trying to represent in their acting, and they empathize with that person and feel the emotion. And what I'm hearing from Don is that applies in other artistic forms. And I'll extrapolate to say that there's a role for you to think about that in your business life and in your leadership, to have that empathy, to feel the emotion of the other person, and then you'll be able to be more impactful in your relationship and your emotional relevance and emotional connection with that person.
Yeah, it's funny because in this country, United States, we see politics being played out that really there's nobody that can control their emotions. All decisions get made from emotional places like fear and resentment and all of those things. And it's really, I don't want to even insult children, but it's really childlike, but it's just dysfunctional. And yet, what you said, emotional intelligence, if that was taught, we wouldn't have this kind of discourse. And something has to change. And this is the whole point of my book, is that I'm trying to raise consciousness, just like Rollo May said, so that people get out of level one and start expanding their consciousness, expanding what's possible, and respecting other.
US politics is a perfect example of what we're talking about here, Don, where...
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take sides in any of this. I watch it from a distance. I'm not directly involved, and I won't be directly involved. But it's a perfect example when you see the actions of certain parties during the previous election, that logic does not necessarily enter some of that decision-making.
Wisdom isn't there. There's a lot of things that aren't there. It's purely dysfunction.
Let's springboard from that. This is going to be a challenging topic, I think, and we'll see how we go with this. It's something I've been researching very recently, Don. So it's relatively new for me as well. But hear me out. I'll give an example of corporate learning and how this might play out, this open mind, open heart, open will. I've formed a view over recent years, and I've been researching it, that corporations, large companies, quite often have negative learning cycles instead of virtuous ones. So there tends to be a habit of a business makes a decision. They go down a certain business venture, and let's say that they lose a ton of money on that first job. A negative learning curve would tell you, well, let's never do that again. A virtuous learning curve would go, okay, well, we lost a ton of money the first time round, but what did we learn from it? And if we did it differently next time, would we get a different result? What's your reflection now, building in open mind, open heart, open will to that? What do you think at the company level organizations could do to create more creativity in the way they go about things?
Well, I certainly agree with just your second suggestion is to look at it, because what I said earlier is, in theory, one of the aspects of it is to look at what was hidden, and look at what is hidden sometimes is the mess that's left behind, or the mistakes that were made that are hidden, that don't want to be revealed. If we don't look, if we don't have the courage to look, the insight to look at some of the things that didn't work, or that were unproductive, or even caused damage, then we're really never going to solve the problem. It's just going to get pushed down the road a little bit. So one of the aspects is to look at everything. And that's why I like this whole concept of wholeness, that nothing is left out. Everything has to be part of the process of whatever it is we're trying to solve or move. Because if there's something left out, then you're not looking at the whole picture. It's a little bit like somebody who's never seen a car, and they find a tire, and they try to figure out what it is, what the rest of it was, or if there even was a rest of it. They'll never know, because you just can't understand the whole system. So that's one aspect. And I'm sure there's many more, but a lot of companies, and large companies particularly, that change is difficult for them. To have somebody like you really guiding them through a process is essential, I think, that helps them to look at what went wrong and how can we do it better. And having the open mind, the open heart, and getting them into a space that is brand new, that they can operate from the present moment and develop something new. I think the process is just, it obviously is in Otto's mind, tailor-made for that kind of a situation.
For the audience at home, I want to now summarize quickly deep listening before we go into our next topic, because we've spoken about it for some time now and there was a lot there. So to leave you with a takeaway, what Don is sharing with us is, in deep listening, you need to build it up over a period of time, and it has certain levels about it. Starting with level 1 with habits, moving to having an open mind, then moving to having an open heart, and finally, an open will. So please take that away, think about it, practice a self-reflection of where you may sit on that continuum and what you can do to embrace deep listening in your own habits and in your own approach in life, and also how you might embrace that with your teams as team leaders. The next question then, Don, is what are some of the obstacles that someone might meet in trying to embrace this concept?
Otto particularly talks about 3 obstacles, and we all have them. I have them. They're not going to go away. And the first one being the voice of judgment. It's something that we all have. We might judge something. Somebody may say something to it, maybe something I've said today. Some of your listeners, they say, well, I don't know about that. I don't know, I'm not into that or whatever. So it's judgments come up. They're from the first level, and they're very effective at stopping you from expanding and becoming more conscious or more aware of what's possible and what's available to you. They'll stop you, especially if it's on the unconscious level, like my example right from the beginning, that I thought I couldn't do two things at once. That's a perfect example. See, the next one is the voice of cynicism. So maybe you'll say, I don't want to do that. I don't want, somebody will maybe, think I'm this or that if I do this, or that's not good enough for me, or whatever it is. The cynic puts everything down before they even get a chance. And it generally comes out of a feeling of fear of something. It's cynical, so I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to say it wouldn't work, it doesn't this, or that's not right, or whatever it is. Third one is a big one for everybody, and it could be broad, but it's the voice of fear. Going back to my example, I had a fear that if I did anything else, my graphic arts business would suffer and I wouldn't be successful. I needed to apply 100% of myself to that. So that was based on a fear I had that I couldn't do something else and still do them both well. And it also could be a fear of failing, or fear of, gee, if I accept this, people will not like me, or they'll make fun of me, or they'll judge me. So it's endless. Fear can be endless, but it's very, very powerful. It will stop you in your tracks, always.
I want to share with the audience a bit of what I take away from that. And I want you to think about this quite carefully. And Don started with the statement that says, even he has these, right? And he shared with us all of the voices that he's heard and thought about over time. And obviously he's overcome those and been quite successful at what he does. So the first thing is it's completely normal for you to have voices within yourself, voices of judgment, voices of cynicism, voices of fear. It's completely normal for you to have those voices and for you to be thinking and processing in that way. So you're not unusual if you have those. It's also going to be quite likely, particularly if you're looking to embark on a journey to do something that you love, that some of those voices might be external voices, might be loved ones, family, friends, people that you trust, who might also share with you their voices of judgment, cynicism, and fear. That's completely normal, and it's nothing to worry about. What's most important is how you process that and what you do about it. So I want to pick particularly on the voice of fear for a moment, Don. And I've been racking my brain as to which famous athlete said this. But the one that always comes to my mind on this one is that I've missed every shot that I never took. And I think it was a basketball player. I'm going to have to research it now and I'll put it in the show notes. But I missed every shot that I never took. That's the voice of fear. That's the power of the voice of fear.
That's great.
We spoke a lot about creativity. We spoke a lot about creativity in the artistic world. We did. And I think in general life, people think about creativity and they think instantly about visual arts. They think about also music. They think about all those kind of things in creativity. In my world, which is a heavily engineering-dominated world, a lot of people think about creativity in terms of invention and innovation. Yeah. What I want to test with you now, though, is creativity. You said it before. It's part of everyday part of life. To me, creativity is also the financial accountant that comes up with a brand new business model It's also the entrepreneur that comes up with a new go-to-market strategy. To me, every single person out there that's listening to this podcast can embrace creativity in some way in their life. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, this goes back to my comment about Matt Lohmeyer in negotiation, is that creativity is life. Creativity, we're all creating anyway. We're all just in life creating, or we're creating our world. Some of us are in level one, we're repeating the past, but we created that and we're continuing to create that. But some of us want to expand and we expand. Some of us will listen to this and maybe they'll have their and story from our talk today and they'll go off in a new direction. And that's creativity. That's listening to something sparks a new idea, a new direction, something, and they're off in a new direction and a new life that snowballs. It just keeps going and going and going because of one word, because of one comment, because of one thing you said or I said. And that is creativity. That's life. And I walk out of here and I'm creating my life. It's how I walk my dog. It's when I'm in the park, I'm looking up and am I really awake? Am I awake? Am I taking in the beauty of what I'm seeing? Am I attentive to my dog? I'm creating, I'm taking in the world. I'm present in my life. That's being creative.
So many great takeaways today, Don. I love it. I'm going to reflect on that myself for many days and weeks to come and see how I can apply it in my own life. For the audience, really think about everything we've covered today and think about those two bookends. Creativity, it's not what you think, and creativity is life, and it can be part of everything that you do. Look at this, look at the levels and think about going from level one, the habits, through to having an open mind, an open heart, an open will, and you'll be really surprised how creative you can become when you embrace the concept of deep listening. So thank you so much, Don. One of the questions we ask all of our guests, and I didn't preempt you with this before we started, I like to get a very natural answer to this question, but I always like to talk about what you know now that you wish you knew previous. So what's one piece of advice or one bit of knowledge that you wish 20-year-old Don Campbell knew?
Well, that's such a beautiful question. And I really, as you were saying that, and it just came out, I quickly went back and could see myself as 20-year-old young man in Canada. And I see myself now as a 71-year-old man. And I think, wow, if that guy had my wisdom today, where would I be? I've gone through a lot of lifetimes in this life. I've learned so much. I've tried so many things. I've failed so many times. I've learned so much. I've had the privilege of learning from so many wonderful people. And I've come to a place in my life that I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for life and being able to be creative in my life, to be able to live my life and to connect with people like you, like anybody. I just feel it's such an honor to be in my life and to be, and that young guy so long ago was so scared. He wanted to, and he had courage. He made a lot of decisions. He had courage, but it was painful back then for him. And I had a lot of pain and I had a lot of depression. But now I've come to a place, I'm just in love with life.
I'm in love with life. I love that, Don. Thank you so much for sharing. What a great story. That I shouldn't say this because all of my other podcast guests will be upset when I say this. That's the best answer we've had to that question. I just love that. That was beautiful. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to share a few things with the audience. First of all, I teased you at the start to say this. We are going to run a competition where if you register for the Leadership Project newsletter, and there'll be a link in the show notes for you to do so, all the people that register for that and drop us a note about this podcast will go into a competition where you can win one of 3 copies of Don's book, Creativity, It's Not What You Think. And I strongly encourage you to enter that competition to win the book. We'll also include a link for you to purchase the book on Amazon. And I'm going to say something here on behalf of Don, and in some respects, it's on behalf of all authors out there. The other thing that authors really cherish is reviews. So if you do purchase and enjoy a copy of Don's book, please do take that extra step of going back into Amazon and leaving a rating and also a review. It means a lot to the authors. For those that don't know how a Amazon algorithm works, it's heavily based on that reviewer kind of cycle. And if lots of people are giving Don's books 5 stars and great reviews, then Don's book appears in more people's searches. Now, you're not just helping Don when you do that. When you've enjoyed Don's book, that means that your friends and other people in the world are also going to enjoy Don's book. So the more that you do leave those ratings and reviews, that you're actually helping other people in the world to discover Don's amazing work. As a final note, Don, I'd just like to hand to you anything that you would like to share with the audience, any topic at all, whether how they get in contact with you if they want to know more, or anything. The floor is completely yours.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this, Mick. It's been wonderful talking to you. I love your insight. I love your ability to listen. I really felt listened to, and you read my book, and you really got it. You understood it. It was really a pleasure to be talking to you about it. If people want to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, which is doncampbellcreativity.com. I also have an Instagram that is Don Campbell Creativity in Instagram, and also one in Facebook. So you can get in touch with me through there, and you can also go to my sculpture site, which is doncampbellsculpture.com. But if you do a search for me on Google and say sculpture or creativity, you'll find me. But once again, thank you, Mick. A really, really wonderful experience for me.
Thank you so much, Don. It's been our complete pleasure. I personally learned so much, and I know that our audience will as well. You've been listening to The Leadership Project with your host, Mick Spears. We hope you really enjoyed this great interview with Don Campbell. Don't forget to enter the competition to win a copy of Don's book, Creativity, It's Not What You Think. All you need to do is subscribe to the Leadership Project newsletter by going to www.mickspears.com. Please join us again soon as we bring you more great content and more great guests on the podcast. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.